Hi, I'm Melinda Schwakhofer, and I'm here to tell you about my quilt, Breathe. I made this quilt in 2020 in response to the murder of George Floyd in May of that year and the worldwide eruption of the Black Lives Matter protests. At the time that I heard of the killing, I was devastated, and I read the papers all that weekend, looked at the photographs that were coming out from it. I was grief-stricken, and I was infuriated that this has happened once again. And I could understand the protests, and I could understand why people were toppling statues of slavers and colonialists. I wanted to make a quilt that talked about the root of the problem, which I feel is the unacknowledged history of slavery in the United States. I started at the bottom with an image of the Brooks slave ship, and I also used images from this to make the plinth, the central figure standing on his body, and also this border around the inner part of the quilt. And all of the fabric in this quilt was digitally designed and printed, and I screen printed the words "I can't breathe" in the background here. I started at the bottom with posters of human beings for sale. They were called Negroes or slaves. They were cargo. They weren't even considered as human beings. And the next set of posters I found were for runaway slaves. These were owners of slaves who'd run away, putting posters up with money rewards to get them back. These people were now seen as property. And when they were named in some of these posters, they were given names by plantation owners. They were not these people's names. They still did not have their own agency in slavery and in not having their names. I also learned about runaway slave patrols, plantation police, which gave rise to many police departments in the United States. So police brutality is not a new or modern problem. In the 60s, with the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X spoke very eloquently about police brutality. And here I have a protester from the 60s and then a more contemporary woman protesting against police brutality. And at the top of the quilt, where the figure's head is, I've got photos from the recent protests that were happening in Minneapolis. And I found this image of the man so powerful because it's during COVID and he's pulled his mask down around his neck and he's letting his rage out. He's letting his fury out against this happening. On the four corners of the quilt, I have figures which echo each other. At the bottom, there's a man and a woman from an abolitionist poster saying, "Am I not a woman and a human being?" Or "Am I not a man and a human being?" These are people wanting to assert their humanity. And at the top, I've got a white police officer and Colin Bukernick taking a knee against racism. And I put haiku into a lot of my work because I feel like poetry can help sum up a lot of things that even pictures are hard to put into words. And the haiku that I wrote for this one is, "Smoldering embers, centuries-old rage, ignite into flame. We breathe." And now I'd like to tell you about the back of the quilt. The back of the quilt begins with the words, "Remember the unnamed." This is to remember the millions who died in the Atlantic crossing and in slavery. It's flanked by two periwinkles, which were the most common wildflower brought to grave sites of enslaved Americans. These flowers have led researchers to finding many unmarked burial grounds and is a symbol of the endurance of enslaved Americans and their legacy. The cenotaph in the center of the quilt is with the hashtag "Say Their Names," and it's from a website that highlights names of Black Americans who were killed by police or civilians. Their names are from recent times through October 3rd, 2020, when I finished making the quilt. And here you can see George Floyd's name, and that there were many who followed his death. So thank you for listening to me talk about my quilt, and I hope someday you get to see it in person.